So we just got done filming Living in Loveland and Living in Fort Collins 2022. So if you haven't already, maybe check that video out after this one. We were kind of friendly with each other, but there are definitely distinguishable differences between Fort Collins and Loveland. And one of the ways that we've used to kind of look at what might be better for one person versus another is grinding it down to pros and cons when you are specifically looking at the other community. So today's video, we are looking at the pros and cons of Loveland versus Fort Collins in 2022. What's up everybody? My name is Patrick Soukup with Soukup Real Estate Services, here with Connor Martin, also of Soukup Real Estate Services. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to Living in Fort Collins and check out Connor's page, Loveland Lifestyles. At the end of the video, if you've enjoyed the content, give it a thumbs up, comment, share it. Let us know what your thoughts are. And if you're looking at moving or selling or investing here in Northern Colorado, please feel free to reach out, call, text, or email. We've got your back when it comes to all things Northern Colorado. Without any further delay, let's jump into today's video, pros and cons of living in Loveland versus living in Fort Collins. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, so Fort Collins has a population of 175,000 people versus 80,000 or so in Loveland.
Yep.
But Fort Collins has 5 major arteries heading north and south, 5 heading east and west, which what that does is really kind of decongests our roadways. Now, 287, Harmony Road are definitely going, and Mulberry are definitely going to be kind of our busiest thoroughfares, but fortunately, even with double the population, it feels to me that Fort Collins is less congested than Loveland, because Loveland, from what I can see, is got one major thoroughfare heading north and south, 287, yep, and one major thoroughfare heading east and west on US 34.
Oh yeah.
And when I am driving on those, man, I just feel like there's not a time, and that's to the growth of Northern Colorado, but there's not a time where there's not any cars. It feels like there is always some traffic, and don't get me wrong, like Fort Collins definitely has its traffic as well, but for having double the population, you can kind of offset some of those roads. Like when I go into work on a daily basis, I either can take US 287 College Avenue, or I can take LeMay Avenue, head up north, hop on Riverside, jump downtown, and just depending on whether I am dropping the kids off at daycare or picking them up, or if I'm picking up coffee on the way into work, is depending on which way I'm taking. So for me, one of the pros of Fort Collins is we are in a grid system, which for me takes off a little bit of that traffic congestion.
And I definitely agree with you on that 100%. I would definitely say our roads in Loveland is not meant for a larger population and for a growing population. I think we are starting to build that infrastructure and get it bigger, but you are right. Highway 34 Eisenhower is really our biggest our fairway to get over to I-25 and then up to Estes Park. It gets jammed up in the summertime due to Estes travel and traffic going up that way. You also have a bunch of commuters heading to DIA in Denver, heading up to Greeley, over to Boulder and those areas. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it does feel congested. One of the biggest parts that I like about it though versus Fort Collins in terms of driving purposes is that we have a lot more back roads and it is a lot more open. So once you get out of the heart and center of Loveland, once you get east of I-25 or you just get to the west along the foothills of Loveland, the roads tend to open up. They might be 1-lane roads, where I know Fort Collins has a lot more 4-lane roads, 2-lane roads. We're very small roads, but you're going to be more out by yourself more often. You know, you're going to have more stop signs versus stoplights. Loveland's becoming a huge benefit of having roundabouts. You know, I know Fort Collins is getting to that point, but they're so built out already. I don't see as many as Loveland has been putting in, which for some people, roundabouts are awesome. For others, people absolutely hate roundabouts, which I can definitely understand. But for commute-wise, I think that's why Loveland is so great, is because we're so centrally located. We have a lot of back roads to get over to Fort Collins, to where if 287 is busy, you know, you could jump onto 392 and then head west on just a county road. Same deal if you're heading over to Berthoud or Longmont or wanting to go up to Boulder or Erie. You don't have to take the main fairways. You can take all these county roads that are quick stop signs. They're still 50 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, and you can still get there relatively quick without the front frustration of having someone next to you, someone in front of you, and someone behind you, and you feel like you're boxed in all the time. But I definitely agree the traffic in Loveland has significantly gotten worse over the last few years.
For sure, for sure. All right, there's my number one. There's my number one pro of Fort Collins versus Loveland. What you got?
Okay, so my number one pro, and it is definitely the thing that I hear most about when I take people. So when people look us up or look you up, they're namely looking at Fort Collins, and half the time they don't even know where Loveland's at. You know, we're a very small town, 80,000 people compared to Fort Collins. But the big thing that I sit there and say we have is mountain views. I think our mountain views in Loveland, Colorado are 100 times better than Fort Collins. You guys have Horsetooth, but you guys really have the foothills to look at, in my opinion. You know, they're not really the Rocky Mountains. When you go to Loveland and you're sitting driving on I-25, look to the west, you're going to see the Rocky Mountains. In anywhere within Loveland, unless you're right up butted up next to the foothills, you're going to get snow-capped white hills. You're going to actually get the views that you would picture in a magazine of Colorado. Versus Fort Collins, when I've looked around, and I look at a lot of acreages because I've worked with a lot of clients that are looking for acreages with mountain views. The further north you go, the less views you get, and the more you're going to have to angle your house right to get it to where you're actually going to get maybe one or two views of, like Long's Peak or something like that, where pretty much anywhere in Loveland, you're going to have it no matter what, unless you got a house in front of you, which with development does happen.
Definitely. Interesting. I like it, because I would say that's something that I think a lot of folks moving in from out of state really are interested in. And I remember working with clients from Boston, and the individual kind of looked through a gap of a tree and said, I can see the mountains right there. So that's how important, you know, the mountains are to people who aren't necessarily from here, either from Texas and it's flat, or the East Coast and they see the ocean. But I like it. I like it.
And just out of curiosity for you, so like me living in areas with mountains and you living in Fort Collins, do you eventually
take it for granted?
Yep.
Oh, 100%.
That's exactly what it is for me, and that's where I started noticing when I had people from New Mexico coming out, Florida, California even. They're just like, we want mountain views, and we want the Rocky Mountains. We don't want the foothills. That's something I never really picked up on until about this year. It was just like, okay, well, what are mountains to people?
Right. No, definitely. I mean, it's something that I think I wake up daily and see this beautiful creation in this world and don't think anything of it. I've, 33 years on this earth, and I've seen it every day of my life, pretty much.
Exactly.
Not pretty much, but yes, I have. So yeah, well, I love it. Okay, my number two pro of Fort Collins versus Loveland, and I'm coming at you on this one.
Right, let's go.
Is our funding to our schools is substantially higher.
Hurts right there.
It is. Now, there is a con with this, is that our property taxes are higher than Loveland's and a lot of that is, you know, driven by the funding to our schools, but our schools get about 10 mils higher than Thompson R2 does. And there's 2 points to this that I want to make is, when your mill levy is determined, your actual value of a property, then your assessed value, then your mills are dictating how much your property taxes are.
Yep.
When you have a higher median sales price, like Fort Collins does, about $570,000 comparatively $520 or so in Loveland.
Yep.
And then you have an additional 10 mills to play with. We're talking about, and I've done some math, but it could be anywhere between, depending on housing units and pricing and property taxes and price points, all that kind of stuff, it could be anywhere between $8 to $19 million more annually going to Poudre school districts than Thompson Valley is, or Thompson R2 is. And I would say Fort Collins school system is sought out, nationwide.
Oh yeah.
And our school system is, one of the reasons why it does so well is it is so well funded. Our arts programs, science, PE, all these things that maybe other schools have to cut because either they can't afford to, staff them or have the facilities to supply. But Poudre School District is pretty phenomenal when that comes. And I would say comparatively to Loveland does great, but Fort Collins just is maybe one step above.
And I do agree with you. I mean, that one does hurt a little bit, but I definitely understand it because, I have, when you go and look at Loveland, I don't know how many high schools you guys have in Fort Collins.
A few.
Yeah, and you guys still have enough people to go and play all the sports, be a part of the different extracurricular activities. When I've talked to parents and students in like Loveland High School and places like that, You know, the sports teams struggle because we have a couple high schools and just the kids are so separated that sometimes they don't even have enough to make a JV soccer team. You know, they might only be able to have enough people to make a varsity soccer team. And so that's one of the things that I definitely see, you know, in terms of funding, in terms of the amount of people that are going to those schools. You know, that made a huge difference for me when I lived in Bozeman, Montana. Our school is 2,500 people. And so it was nice. Our teams were all strong. The education was good. Our classes were good. It just seems like it is definitely lacking just a little bit in Loveland. I wouldn't say that, you know, the education's probably too much different on that side, but if you're looking for a good sports team, or, you know, where your kid is focusing on the sports versus the academics, I definitely would say Fort Collins is the better option on that side. So I will chalk up a point to you on that one for sure.
All right. Where we got with number 2 for you?
So my second pro of living in Loveland is going to be, you know, we have a lot of outdoor recreation, and it's not just like going up to the mountains. You know, Estes Park is close. We do have places like Coyote Ridge, Devil's Backbone for going out, but we also have a big area for parks. You know, because we are a retirement community, we need to have things that are close, easy access that you can get to. So we have places like Mahaffey Park where you're going to have just hundreds of acres of, you know, soccer fields. They have one of the coolest parks, except for maybe like Twin Silos in Fort Collins. I think maybe beats it by a little bit.
Twin Silos is pretty sick.
Yeah, it's a really cool park. If you ever want to take your kids here, those are the 2 top ones, would be Mahaffey and Twin Silos. But, you know, Loveland to me has some of the best parks, some of the best areas to go to, like play pickleball, play tennis. We actually have a lot of older adults that go out and play those and have those. I bet Fort Collins does too, but it might be a different age genre that goes out and does it. We have, you know, beer softball leagues, you know, just the basics that you typically see in most towns. And so to me, you know, community outdoor activity is really pushed in Loveland, and it's really to try and build a community out there. You know, we're small enough still to where it doesn't feel like you're just a part of a number out there. You're going to be someone. You're going to be able to be a part of a team
Make a
for
difference.
years. That's exactly right. And so to me, that's my second biggest reason why I really like Loveland, and I think it's better than Fort Collins.
Okay. I'm gonna stay quiet on that one because I'm just gonna leave it up to you to do your own research on that. But no, I think that Fort Collins and Loveland does a great job on outdoors activity, focus on recreation and lifestyles. Yep. So we're very, very fortunate that that is important. I saw a buddy of mine put something on Instagram that he saw a kickball league, you know, in Fort Collins, and it was like one of those things. It's like, doesn't everywhere have it? But, you know, not many places do. So it's one of those things where definitely, you know, research it when you come here, and you will find your tribe. I had a client from Argentina, and she loves to play soccer, and she was concerned about finding, you know, groups of friends when she came here. And when she moved here, she now plays on, I think it's like Monday nights, Tuesday nights, and Saturdays. She has like a women's league, a co-ed league, and one other. But so you can find your group here, fortunately, with like Facebook groups, and then also just doing your research, going down to the, you know, the rec centers and seeing what's going on. They can get you a lot of information. Fort Collins and Loveland has a ton of options. So.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Well, I think number 3, on the flip side of being outdoors and you know, spending that time where people do come to Fort Collins and Northern Colorado and Loveland to enjoy the mountain views and outdoor activity, we are a gig community. We are a group of people who now work pretty much remotely, and what you need is some phenomenal internet. And Fort Collins, even though it's still building out, has Fort Collins Connections, which is a municipally funded utility broadband internet. And I've got it come into my house, and I love it. It's affordable, it's fast, it's clear, and I just can't get enough of it. And we are very, very fortunate that we are very forward thinking as far as Fort Collins, because this started in 2017, pre-pandemic, that all of a sudden we now have fiber to every house in Fort Collins. By the end of July of 2022, we should have every house ran conduit and a dedicated fiber line. So my pro number 3 is our Fort Collins Connections broadband gig internet.
I knew you were going to bring that one up because that is a really cool deal. I mean, I've just heard such great deals about it being in Loveland. You know, we got Xfinity,
Yeah.
you know, and Xfinity is great. They're expensive. They are, you know.
They're the behemoth.
They are. And so just if you move to Loveland, get ready for the idea that we do have a little bit more expensive internet. And if you do get internet there, if it's not Xfinity or someone else, I've really struggled with it. You know, you lose connection a lot in Loveland. And so that's just something to keep your eye on, is just knowing which provider you're really going to go with when you move to Loveland, because we don't have probably as good of technology solutions as Fort Collins does at this point. And I don't think we're going to be there anytime soon, unfortunately, just with how our population is.
Even if you got it accepted today,
Yep.
I mean, we're talking 5 years. 2017 is when this, I mean, it has got to be, you know, a long tail for these decisions to be made. So Fort Collins, like, definitely, like, props to him, and former Mayor Wade Troxel, you know, who was visionary to do that.
Oh yeah, no, they very on the forefront, and I definitely agree on that. I think Loveland's stuck in the old school days, you know, pen and paper and
it'll get
telephone line,
little tablets and chisels.
Exactly.
Well, what you got for your number 3?
All right, so my number 3 one is going to be just the enjoyment of the art scene that we have in Loveland. You know,
oh, absolutely.
It was something I really didn't know about. You know, I went to school, you know, way long ago, 5, 7, 8 years ago, and I went to school for ceramic arts. And so I was throwing pottery, bowls, and, you know, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I just knew I couldn't make any money in it because I wasn't that good. But when I moved to Loveland, I found out how many art programs they have, how many places you can go to go view art, go see art. You know, we're a huge sculpture group. You know, bronze sculptures are huge here in Loveland. So if you ever want to just even get a small example of it, go over to Benson Sculpture Park. It is by far some of the coolest sculptures you'll see.
Is that by Loveland High School?
No, oh yes, it is. It's right next to Loveland High School. They do a bunch of fairs there for art. So every summer we have a huge fair there that goes on where you can buy anything from, you know, Native American knives all the way up to $80,000 to $100,000 sculptures. Oof. And so,
gotta really love your art.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Loveland really does. You know, since 1985, they've been putting about 1% of their budget towards, you know, buying sculptures, maintaining sculptures, and just making sure that Loveland will always be a place for art. So when you go like downtown, like, you know, in the wintertime it slows down a little bit more, but when you go down Loveland on a Friday night in downtown, you will see just vendors all over selling art. You'll have art studios and shows going on downtown Loveland. So if you're an artist and you want a place where you're going to be surrounded by artists, you know, that Loveland is a great place to be. And especially if like you're a CSU student or a teacher in CSU that's part of the art program, Loveland's a great place to check out. And I think that's my third best reason why I like living in Loveland, Colorado.
Yeah, and no arguments there. I think Fort Collins does a really phenomenal job about its art and its focus on its alleys and, you know, murals on walls and electrical boxes and things like that. But Loveland has an identity in art, and I think you are absolutely right. Loveland far outweighs and excels and exceeds Fort Collins in its focus and intention to that arts and culture scene. So 100% I'll give that one up to you, and Loveland does a great job. So we're fortunate that they're our neighbor to our south, so we don't have to go too far to enjoy that kind of pro that does definitely beat out Fort Collins. But
yeah.
Well, okay, we've got our beautiful parts of Fort Collins comparatively to Loveland and Loveland comparatively to Fort Collins, but I think it wouldn't be fair to individuals watching, which we do pros and cons videos for both our channels.
Yep.
And honestly, I think we are pretty fair when we talk about them. Like, yes, there are tons of cons, tons of pros, but really people moving here deserve to know if it is the right community for them. And we don't want to work with clients who decide to move here and then all of a sudden decide this place sucks because you guys are, you know, being lovey-dovey and not telling us the nitty-gritty about these places. And so the cons are just as important from my perspective as the pros can be. So one of the probably my 3 cons that Fort Collins definitely just can't keep up with on Loveland is we're landlocked. We have Wellington to our north, Loveland to our south, Windsor and Timnath to our east, I-25. We don't have much more growth that we can even do. We have some infill development opportunities. We have this Montava project. We have another project on Ziegler and Horsetooth. Between those, we have, you know, thousands of homes coming to the market. But really comparatively to Loveland, it has so much room to move and grow and develop that, you know, 80,000 versus 175,000. So I think one of the things that Fort Collins will struggle with is our availability to grow. Really, here in the not so distant future, our only place to grow will be up.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. When you drive around Fort Collins, you really just don't see much open land.
Yeah.
And if you do, it's probably owned by a farmer who's not going to let it go for another 100 years.
That's true.
But no, in Loveland, I mean, you can even see it now. Just, again, we have 80,000 people, and, you know, you can really feel the growth. Even near my neighborhood on the northwest side, I have 3 neighborhoods going in behind me.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me on that side, like Fort Collins, you know, they're all growing out, and they got some spaces out more on the east side of Fort Collins, where Loveland, you know, I don't know if it was smart or just by pure luck, but they saved a lot of land on the west side of Loveland. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they really saved, in my idea, you know, some of the prime land that, you know, you typically wouldn't see, you know, in Fort Collins near the foothills, near hikes. And that's, I think, a huge benefit of Loveland as well on that side. Yeah. You know, one of my big negatives of Loveland, especially due, you know, and it's not that big of an issue, but, you know, with it being more of a retirement community in my eyes, older generations, you know, sometimes it can take a little longer to get around, especially with like Estes Park being around and having a bunch of foreigners from out of country coming in. You know, you just run into some weird traffic situations that you just could never imagine. People not knowing where to turn, not knowing where to go, people who will drive 10 to 15 miles under the speed limit, you know, even with not even a drop of, you know, rain on the ground. Yeah. It's just a slower paced lifestyle. So when you do come to Loveland, when you live there, be ready to sit in a grocery line for 10, 15 minutes because someone's trying to write out a check. You know, those are the things that you will run into, and you just got to learn how to be patient and know that you're living the island life when you're in Loveland versus Fort Collins, where, you know, when you're out driving in Fort Collins, sometimes it's kind of, it can be a little like NASCAR when you're around the college students and things like that. There's some battles. You know, I thought it was Denver was the only place that occurred at, but, you know, Fort Collins is starting to become a little bit more of an aggressively area on the road, and I mean that's
we're just trying to get faster to our locations and not spend our day in the car. Why would you spend the day in the car when you could spend it outside enjoying a beautiful community, right?
And that's totally right, because every time when I'm driving in Loveland, I'm just thinking, dude, does everybody just work in their vehicles now? I thought I was the only one who had to drive around for work, but it seems like everyone's driving around at a slow pace in Loveland, just enjoying the day in their vehicle.
See, which kind of leads into my con number 2, honestly, for Fort Collins versus Loveland, is you guys are 15, 20 minutes closer to Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park, and really it's, what would you say, 20 to 30 minute drive to Estes Park?
Yeah, probably about 20, 25.
Yeah, and maybe another 15 minutes or so to Rocky Mountain National Park from there.
Yep.
And so I don't find myself going to Estes or Rocky Mountain National Park nearly as much as I think I would if, you know, it was just like, hey, let's just jump up there for dinner real quick, you know?
It takes a lot longer for you guys to get there.
It does, especially if you're coming from Northwest and in the Country Club area, or Northeast, or Southeast. You just have to commute across town and then up through. So I think that's something that I would say is such a beautiful part of Northern Colorado is Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park. And you guys being that much closer is definitely something that I think is a pro for you guys, a con for us.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree. You know, it is a destination area to go, even with COVID being the case, and definitely check out before you go up to Estes Park, because they do, for Rocky Mountain National Park, they will have a registry that you have to sign up before you can go in. So just be prepared for that. But being able to just go up to Estes Park in 25 minutes from the west side or even from the east side, that's so quick. You can go up there, have a full-on day, and still be able to come down before dark, and, you know, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of my favorite things about living up there is being able to have a road that I can go up to.
Real quick.
Yep. So that's just a huge deal on that side.
Yeah.
You know, my second biggest issue with Loveland is the fact that we don't have a lot of difference in, and we talked about before, but with restaurants.
Yeah.
You know, restaurants, shopping, to me it's a little bit of a struggle. You know, other than downtown Loveland, we don't have very many like boutique shopping areas. You know, all our stuff is very commercial. It's just big box store deals. So we have Nike, we have Shields, we got Big Five, PF Chang's. You know, when you're in Loveland, you're going to be used to the box stores. And I think that's a little bit to do with the traffic maybe we get from Estes Park and from people out of country. You know, those are pretty high destination areas for people like that. But for the local person, like if I wanted to go get something local clothes-wise or something like that, more than likely I'm going to find myself going down to Fort Collins, downtown Fort Collins, to find something, because you just don't get as many options, especially food-wise. Like, we really, like, one of my biggest issues with Loveland is we don't really have an Italian place anymore. We used to have one in downtown Loveland that closed because of the pandemic. Slate Italian Eatery, and so now I have to go to downtown Fort Collins or like Oregano's in Fort Collins just to even get a good meal anymore for Italian.
Yeah.
So those are just some of those little small things, you know, you can deal with it. You know, I'm a picky eater, but when it comes to box stores, they're pretty good at dealing with picky eaters like me, so they works. But for anybody who wants to have a little bit more of an in-depth experience with shopping or food, Fort Collins is definitely the place to go.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, again, that kind of feeds into my con number 3 of Fort Collins versus Loveland. Is I love, one of the things I love about Loveland is the redevelopment opportunities that exist, and really throughout the entire community, like South Side, downtown, along 34 First on the north side of town. There are a lot of kind of blighted, commercial buildings that have not necessarily succeeded, or businesses have moved out. And there's decent deals for an investor, entrepreneur to own some real estate, redevelop the area in the sense of not a massive redevelopment, which is what happened with kind of the Foundry, which has been super cool.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what is it? Is it 3 blocks or 4 blocks that were
4 blocks?
4 blocks that got redeveloped into something that is really pretty cool. But as you are just looking at building a business or buying some real estate and starting a company, like there's some really good opportunities throughout Loveland that I think with the growth of Northern Colorado will become more and more viable to people that are wanting to take those risks. But in Fort Collins, we're really pretty limited on those redevelopment areas. Old Town North, Mulberry Air Park has some, Mulberry Corridor has a little bit, but really there's not a ton of blighted areas that are just ripe for the picking, and if they are, they're asking a substantial sum for those properties for future development and redevelopment options. So I'd say con number 3 for Fort Collins is our redevelopment opportunities for a young, budding, aggressive entrepreneur who wants to take their business or their opportunity, buy a piece of property and build it into something cool, are not nearly as much as there are in Loveland.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that. There is a lot of opportunity to make Loveland a little fresher.
and it needs it.
Yeah,
it needs it in some areas.
It needs an air freshener on some of the spots, and I think Loveland, just like the Foundry, that was really the biggest push I've seen in Loveland since I've lived there, to actually do something with downtown Loveland and try and make it something where, when I first moved there, I mean, it was pretty much dead except for maybe 3 restaurants in downtown Loveland. Yeah. So that is definitely a huge pro on that side. One of the biggest cons that I do have with Loveland, and it just depends on where you hang out and what you do, but Loveland is a pretty big industrial area. That's a huge part of our jobs that are in Loveland, and it's also part of the commuting issues that we have also with traffic during the 7 a.m. rush or the 6 p.m. rush. For me, having just a bunch of industrial buildings all around the east side of Loveland, it trashes it up just a little bit. They try to make them look nice. They try to make them far enough out, but one, they're taking really prime land for industrial uses that could be used for homes and acreages that, have the best views I've ever seen of the Rocky Mountains, but they put a 50, 60,000 square foot building there.
Right.
Even with Amazon moved into Loveland, and they're just on the southeast side of Loveland, and they got just a bunch of warehouses out there, and I know they're making a bunch more too, so you're going to run into a lot of more traffic going into the back roads and sometimes on that east side. And it just, when I drive into like Longmont, Colorado, like Longmont is another big industrial area, and what I fear is that Longmont and Loveland are going to eventually kind of be the same, where there's going to be more industrial areas in, at least on the east side of Loveland than on the west side, to where it just makes that area a little less desirable to be. And so that's one of those ones that's unique to me. It's something I've noticed as I've, lived there now, and I've been paying more attention to what I see and where I'm at. And that's definitely where it seems like our budget and our future is going towards, is more the industrial side versus, maybe going downtown Loveland and trying to create more of a tourist side or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the roles that our city planners, city council, mayors, all play a vital role in the success of our communities now and into the future. And yeah, I think it's actually disheartening to see what low turnout across the, United States small local governments have as far as voting, but they make dramatic impacts, for our communities that, have lasting effects now and into the future. So that's something that I'm trying to focus more in on is some of those decisions that have, dramatic impacts in our communities. And so hopefully, Loveland has the best at, heart for it now and into the future, but, definitely time will tell and money talks.
Yep. No, and then I guess I'll add this one last thing with the industrial side. I know Fort Collins has it to a certain regard too, but railroad tracks is the other one that I don't always like bringing up, but I know it's something that
talk about it.
Every time a buyer comes out here from out of state, they're just like, why are all the neighborhoods around railroad tracks? Yeah. Well, it's due to the fact that that's part of our industry out here. And so, you're no matter where you live, you're going to hear a rail, you're going to hear the train horn, you're going to hear it coming through.
Yeah.
And that's just a part that you also have to get ready for when looking at homes, is seeing where those railroad tracks are at.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's part of it, and I think they do a pretty good job at Fort Collins and in Loveland with some quiet zones, but definitely something to pay attention to, because if you don't, it might be something that affects you and your sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my man, honestly, I feel like Fort Collins and Loveland are great communities, and each have pros and cons that hopefully we've hit on some of the bigger ones, but there are other issues that I think would be great for people to ask and inquire about, and I feel like we'll be pretty honest as much as we possibly can be to our knowledge, extent of our knowledge. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, feel free to comment and or direct message, email, text, whatever that might be, Connor or myself, those specific questions.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, I'm good at answering questions, so feel free to, contact me anytime.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for watching Pros and Cons of Loveland versus Fort Collins 2022. Until next time.
All right, peace.